A thrilling walk-off victory to beat the Phillies last night, and Nolan McLean going today for the sweep. All of a sudden, everything is falling in place for the New York Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. I've been covering the New York Mets on this show since the 2019 season. It's the only podcast that covers the Mets 7 days a week throughout the regular season. If you want to find some of my written work, you could do so over at justbaseball.com, where I work as the editor-in-chief. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. The New York Mets right now simply own the Philadelphia Phillies. They've now beaten them in 9 consecutive games at Citi Field so far this year. 5-0, obviously, playing the Phillies at Citi. And they got a chance here today to sweep the Phillies. Not only would that put them within 4 games of them in the division, they would also win the season series. So just like that, the Mets could be in a spot where they're 4 games back with 4 games left to play against the Phillies. And if at the end of the season, these two teams are tied, even if the Phillies win every single game when these two teams meet in September, but somehow when it's all said and done, they got an even record, the Mets would win this division and get that potentially playoff bye depending on how everything shakes out. But regardless, they'd win the division. And at worst, they would host that playoff series in the wild card round. So a lot is still at stake, but it's just been incredible to watch a transformation for this ball club here over the past couple of weeks. And particularly, you beat the Braves over the weekend, and now you take the first 2 games of this series against the Phillies with Nolan McLean going today against Taijuan Walker, what would look like on paper an advantage for the New York Mets. Suddenly, it feels like the division's back in play. It feels like the Mets are once again the World Series contender that has been promised all season long. That hasn't always looked like it. So this team is riding a wave of momentum that could carry them throughout this stretch run if they play their cards right. And we'll talk about part of the cards they're trying to play in the next segment, because they're only going to get deeper when it comes to their roster with Jonah Tong coming up this week. Spent a whole show on it yesterday, did a breaking news show about it, but it's just a really exciting time for this Mets team. And let's talk about the baseball game that took place, because the Mets were able to beat a good starting pitcher in Jesus Luzardo who had his stuff. They were able to overcome another bullpen meltdown by Ryan Helsley, and they were able to do it in the 9th inning against a guy that everybody wanted at the trade deadline in Jhoan Duran, and did so in really impressive fashion. 4 consecutive hits to walk off the Phillies in the 9th inning and stun that team and that fan base once again. It is really getting to the point where the Phillies are looking at the Mets the way that the Mets at times look at the Braves. It is this team that is just a thorn in their side right now. And when you're looking at a division race that does not include the Atlanta Braves this year, starting to feel like the Mets have a legitimate shot here at winning their first division in a decade, since 2015. But again, let's talk more about this game. It was a pitcher's duel early. Sean Manaea once again looked great in the first couple of frames. He was matching Jesus Luzardo at every turn. He struck out 4 of the first 7 batters that he faced, only giving up 1 base runner through 2 scoreless frames. 3rd inning, he worked around a leadoff double. That was a really big spot for him to strand that runner, able to get a couple of ground outs that sandwiched his 5th strikeout of the day to get through the 3rd inning unscathed. 4th inning, leadoff single, but Luis Torrens gunned out Bryce Harper trying to steal 2nd. Manaea picked up 2 more strikeouts and got through the 4th inning without giving up a run. On the other side of it, Luzardo was definitely tested, particularly in the 1st inning. The Mets were able to load the bases against him. He was frustrated with the umpire through 24 pitches, but he was able to strike out Brandon Nimmo to get through that 1st inning, although Nimmo would certainly make up for that later. And after 4 innings of just constantly putting little bit of pressure on Luzardo, having good at-bats. The dam broke for the Mets in the 5th inning, and it came after Sean Manaea gave up a couple of runs. Combination of Manaea and Gregory Soto. In the 5th inning, Manaea ended up running into that wall that we've seen. Leadoff single, gets another strikeout. Francisco Lindor makes a beautiful diving play up the middle. They just couldn't quite turn two on it, but it was a really nice play. Manaea gives up another single, though, and is pulled because when you have runners at first and third, Manaea's over 90 pitches. I totally understood Carlos Mendoza being apprehensive about letting him try to pitch his way through it. And so you have to go into the bullpen in the 5th inning again. I think overall is still a step in the right direction for Manaea. We'll talk about him more throughout the show, but 4 2/3, 6 hits, no walks, 2 runs, 8 strikeouts, and those runs came after he left as Gregory Soto issued a walk and then an RBI single that scored 2, but he was able to get a strikeout to get out of that jam without giving up any of his runs. But I think, again, you have the bullpen being put in a bad spot, having to come in the 5th inning, and the lineup having to now battle back after now trailing by 2 runs against a starting pitcher who, again, had really good stuff. But the Mets were able in that 5th inning to just bounce right back off the mat after they give up 2. Torrens hit by a pitch. Lindor and Soto get base hits with Soto scoring Torrens. A walk by Marte to load the bases for Pete Alonso. Pete had a huge game, 4 hits. His biggest one came in that rally, an RBI double off of Ryan Kirkering to give the Mets a lead. Mark Vientos able to just flare one the other way, get another base hit. He continues to be a clutch bat right now. That was the Mets' 4th run. Brandon Nimmo hits a sacrifice fly to complete a 5-run rally for the Mets, which could have been enough to win this game, and the bullpen eventually would falter. First, it was Huascar Brazaban who came on. He gave up a base hit. Then Mark Vientos saved the double by making a leaping catch on a line drive. Really good play by Vientos. Next ball, though, is ripped again to Vientos. He can't make the diving stop. A double by Harrison Bader. Edmundo Sosa gets an RBI single that scores 1. But credit to Brazaban. He was able to get a couple groundouts to get out of that jam. Could have been a lot worse. Only 1 run came across. Tyler Rogers, 1, 2, 3, 7th. He continues to be outstanding. Schwarber, Harper, Realmuto gets them all out. 8th inning, it's Helsley's turn. And first batter strikeout, then a walk, then Harrison Bader ties the game with a 2-run homer. Bader becoming a Mets killer. He absolutely beat them up in his series playing for the Twins earlier in the season. He's done a great job in this game here, or did a great job in this game, double home run. So Bader becoming a very tough out and someone that you don't want to see in the box right now. Carlos Mendoza surprisingly left Helsley in the game after giving up that homer, and he issued a walk. Then he goes to Edwin Diaz, who just came in, calmly struck out to Bryson Stott's on first base. He's stealing second. He's stealing third behind Diaz. He's just paying him no mind. He's getting the hitters out, and he gets to the 9th inning with this still being a tie game. In the 9th inning, because the Mets didn't score in the bottom of the 8th, he picks up 2 more strikeouts, goes through Schwarber and Harper, has a 1-2-3 inning, faced 5 batters, retired them all, struck out 4. Huge appearance by Diaz in a big game. And that sets up the Mets for a chance to walk it off against Joan Duran, and they did exactly that. Starling Marte rifles a single in the center field, 99-mile-per-hour splitter, very tough to hit, 109 off the bat, just line drive, does a great job. Pete Alonso first pitch swinging on a splitter that hung up for him. Again, a 97-mile-per-hour splitter that he hits about 110 off the bat. And then you have Brett Baty, who hits one 66 miles per hour off the bat, a blooper that falls in, gets far enough away from the third baseman into left field that Brandon Marsh can't come on to make the play, and the Mets load the bases there. Now, you would say that was maybe a lucky hit. If you're a Phillies fan, you'd call that a lucky pop-up that dropped, and it certainly was to some extent. The Mets were very fortunate that found some real estate in the outfield because it set up Brandon Nimmo to walk the game off. But what I will say, and Brandon Nimmo after the game gave Baty a ton of credit, even sort of, I don't know what the right word would be, but knighted him or he basically said to the crowd at Citi Field, get used to Brett Baty. He's going to be here for a long time, which was a fun bit of confidence that he's putting into one of the young guys here. But Brett Baty's at bat was outstanding. I keep on saying the running bit on the show is Brett Baty gets into a 3-2 count every single time he steps into the box. And once again, it was a 3-2 count. But if you look at Beatty going up against one of the best pitchers in baseball, one of the most dominant, he didn't swing at anything outside of the zone. Looked at a pitch outside of the zone, 1-0 count. Next pitch in the zone, swings at it, can't get to it, 1-1. Couple more fastballs out of the zone, doesn't look at them, or he doesn't chase them, looks at them, gets into a 3-1 count, gets a fastball in the zone at 102 miles per hour, tries to catch up to it, can't do it, gets another fastball in the full count pitch, and it's inside, and he just gets a bat on it, inside outs it. Duran did not really lose that at bat. That's one of those outcomes where it's just a bloop that falls in. But Brett Beatty didn't get beat by Duran, and he put the ball in play. When you put the ball in play, you never know what can happen. In this case, it sets up a bases loaded situation for Nimmo, and Nimmo gets himself into a 2-0 hitters count. It was clear at that point that Duran was pretty shaken. They had a mound visit. First pitch after the mound visit, he nearly throws one to the backstop, and Nimmo waits for his pitch, gets the 102 mile per hour fastball in the outer half, goes right with it, rifles it into the outfield, and the Mets have their walk-off victory. So incredibly impressive ninth inning rally. The 5-run rally was really awesome too. Shaw Manaea showed some signs, and you had some arms in that bullpen that pitched well and others that did not, but you're able to get this series and you set yourself up for a potential sweep. Things could not have gone better for the New York Mets in this game. But what I want to talk about next here is how everything seems to be falling in place around this roster with the promotion of Jonah Tong, with Francisco Alvarez potentially coming back very soon. So I want to go through all of those things and just where's this team at in the NL East race? We'll touch on it all in just a minute. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Have you ever decided at the last minute that you want to head to the ballpark with your friends and family and check out a game? Maybe today you're looking to catch the final game of this series, Mets versus Phillies. It's been a crazy environment. If you want to get to the ballpark and have some fun, whether it's against the Phillies or maybe this weekend, Mets versus Marlins, you're running out of opportunities this season. Now is the time, and Game Time makes it fast and simple to get tickets. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch. So sometimes I wait until I'm about to walk into the ballpark, and then I look to get my tickets on Game Time. They've got incredible deals on last-minute tickets, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that'll take the worry out of buying your tickets. And Game Time is the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB, making it easier to browse the app for an exciting upcoming MLB game. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code Locked On MLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code Locked On MLB. That's LOCKEDON MLB for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is almost here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet. So if you like player props, you can go there. If you like to build a same-game parlay, so maybe you think Nolan McLean's going to strike out a bunch of batters, you could take his over on strikeouts. Maybe you think that Francisco Lindor is due to homer, throw that in a parlay with the Mets winning, and if all those things happen, you could take a $5 bet and cash out big time. So if you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app by visiting FanDuel.com and get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet for a chance to win. And if you win, you'll get that $300 in bonus bets. FanDuel, play your game. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us get closer to our next goal of 15,000 subscribers. Now, there were two big news items of the day before the Mets game against the Phillies on Tuesday night. You had the fact that Jonah Tong is going to join this rotation on Friday. We'll touch on that a little bit more in a sec. But you also had the news that Francisco Alvarez is ready to go for a rehab assignment. He told reporters he's not feeling any pain in his thumb. He's been swinging the bat at intensity, and he has started a throwing program. The throwing might be a bigger issue than the swinging because that thumb, he's got to put more pressure on his, pointer finger and his middle finger. And so he's got to put more pressure on those fingers when he's throwing. He's going to catch with a splint on his thumb. So teams might try to run wild on Alvarez, and that's going to be something to monitor. But if he could swing the bat the way that he did before he went down, where he was arguably your best hitter for a month, Well, Francisco Alvarez needs to be on this roster. He is one of your best bats, and he's clearly your best bat at the catcher's position, despite the fact that Torrens had a good couple of days here at the plate. So if Alvarez starts this rehab assignment on Wednesday, which he will, we don't know what a Philly is going to go to. I'd imagine with Syracuse, but regardless if it's Syracuse or Binghamton, if he looks good throughout the rest of this week, Alvarez very well could join the Mets on their road trip. And that's a huge road trip. Obviously, everything's huge at this point, but they're going to play the Tigers starting off on Monday. And that's one of the best teams in baseball. You got a day off on Thursday, and then you face the Reds. And the Reds are the team that's chasing you in the wild card. Now, the Dodgers are doing you a favor this week, beating up on the Reds. And the Mets now have a 3.5 game lead in that race, a much more comfortable lead than where it was a few days ago. So that is a good sign. But if the Reds beat you up, that's going to flip this race a little bit. So you really want your best on the field for that series. And I think that's going to be sort of the latest we see Alvarez, because I could see them potentially keep him on a rehab assignment for early next week and then bringing him up for the Cincy series. But you're going to want him back before you end up in Philly, which will be the final series of a 10-game road trip. And so that's going to be your big September call-up. Francisco Alvarez making his return off the injured list sooner than expected. Granted, there's every chance that Hayden Sanger will go down when Alvarez comes up. It'll just depend on if they want 3 catchers or if they want a speedster off the bench. And speaking of a speedster off the bench, Acuna, as we've touched on in recent shows, he got in a collision on August 20th at first base and was out of the lineup for the rest of the week. He was finally back out there, went 2 for 4 with a walk, an RBI, and a stolen base on Tuesday. So he is a healthy player and definitely an option to add some speed to the Mets bench and give them another defensive replacement. But you think about where this lineup's at, they're loaded right now because all of a sudden Mark Vientos looks like the guy from last year. Starling Marte continues to just give you great veteran at-bats. And Brett Beatty is also giving you great at-bats. So now you have Beatty, Vientos, and Marte, who are 3 guys playing 2 spots in your lineup, essentially, with the DH being split between Marte and Vientos and third base being split between Beatty and Vientos. You got your Fab 4 of Lindor, Soto, Alonso, and Nimmo, with Nimmo healthy and contributing again. Jeff McNeil, your starting second baseman. He's obviously the best all-around second baseman you have. Suddenly, Tyrone Taylor is swinging a good bat. You got Mullins in center field with him, and you got Alvarez behind the dish with Torrens as your backup catcher. I mean, you have a loaded roster, 1 through 14 soon, when the rosters expand, where you're going to be able to have probably at all times a good left-handed bat off the bench and Mauricio, a good right-handed bat off the bench between Marte or Vientos, or even Acuna as another right-handed option. And Acuna is your pinch runner defensive specialist. That's a loaded team that can win a lot of games in September and really take advantage of this stretch run and potentially steal that division from the Phillies. It's right there in front of this team. Obviously, if you lose the game today, it's going to take a little bit of wind out of your sails, but that's not even going to hold you back entirely. I mean, if you take advantage on that road trip, if you go into Philly and at least split that series, you're going to be in a good spot. And so this team, I think, is well positioned to carry this offensive momentum, and the offense can lead them down the stretch. The question is going to be if the pitching can meet them halfway. And that's where the promotion of Jonah Tong is so intriguing, because if Tong comes up and dominates and sticks in this rotation, well, now you got Peterson, Minaya, and Senga. I don't think any of those guys are going to be out of this rotation. McLean and Tong, that's 5. When you have off days, you might not need a 6-man rotation. You'll have McGill, who's going to start in Syracuse on Thursday. You have Holmes. You still have the potential of Brandon Sproat contributing down the stretch. So you can navigate your way through the final month with all the pitching that you have. And the hope is by the time you get to October, 4 names sort of rise above the rest for that rotation mix, and you have a pretty good playoff rotation. I feel great about Peterson. I feel great about McLean right now. Senga, I'm holding out hope, but a little more concerned. Minaya, if he can't figure this thing out as far as giving you the length that you want, if he can just be a 5-and-dive pitcher come the playoffs, that would be great. If he's even a 4-and-dive pitcher who's dominating the lineup the first time through, when you can drop potentially a Jonah Tong into a game after that to go through a lineup the second time through, and then you have your high leverage relievers, oh, you can really be creative with this pitching staff. And I think we're going to see that. I'll talk about that a little bit more here in the final segment today as far as just how the Mets will stack it up. But they're in a pretty good spot here as far as where this pitching staff could go. It's just a matter of deciding which pieces you want to plug where. And I still think there is obviously a concern in that bullpen with the Ryan Helsley has been pitching. And we're going to talk about that to close out the show here. But the rotation right now feels like it's in such a better place than it was. And again, I spent a whole show on Jonah Tong and what the promotion means. And I talked about Carlos Mendoza and what he said about it. Talked about what David Stern said about it. So I really encourage you to watch that full show on the Jonah Tong promotion, because I also get into what Tong has in his arsenal, the challenges he might face in the big leagues, where he can still be really successful, all of that stuff. But he's going to start on Friday, and the Mets said they're going to take this one turn at a time. So the way you have to look at this, Jonah Tong is coming up on Friday to give you that extra rest for Senga, for Minaya, even Peterson. And because Jonah Tong going up against the Marlins, who I don't want to minimize them and say, oh, that's a AAA lineup. They've been good this year, but they're missing Kyle Stowers. They got a lot of younger hitters in that lineup who were in AAA not too long ago. And so it really does seem like a great matchup for Tong's debut. And if he dominates, who knows what the Mets decide to do beyond that. So that's what I want to talk about to close out the show. I want to talk about the final game of this series. Who's going to be available out of that bullpen behind McLean? How can the Mets build a bridge for Edwin Diaz throughout the month of September? And what will that potentially look like come October? So we're going to go through all of that to close out the show in just a minute. Are you still paying for gas? Stop leaving money behind. Get real cash back every time you fill up with the free Upside app. Simply download the free Upside app in your App Store or Google Play Store right now and start earning cash at the pump today. Use my limited promo code SEASON and get an extra 20 cents back per gallon on your first fill up. You can make up to $300 a year just from buying the gas you already needed. At first, I thought it was too good to be true, but it's totally legit. Real people are getting paid just to make their daily commute, and you can too. Plus, you can cash out anytime to your bank account via PayPal or an e-gift card for Amazon and other brands. Don't let this offer drive on by. Download the free Upside app now and use my limited time promo code SEASON, SEASON, for a limited time 25 cents per gallon bonus. That's promo code SEASON. Offers may vary by user and location. Go to upside.com for terms and conditions. We have an important request. Locked On wants to hear from you. We put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and make your favorite podcasts even better. This is your chance to tell us what you like and what you don't, and to answer questions about our advertising. So go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey to get started. Everyone who completes the survey will be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that's lockedonpodcast.com/survey. You can see a QR code on the screen right now if you're watching on YouTube. You can also find a link in the show notes. Thanks for helping us out. Again, it's lockedonpodcast.com/survey. All right, so let's go through the bridge to Edwin Diaz, and we'll start with the upcoming game. Nolan McLean against Taijuan Walker, a chance to sweep. Hopefully McLean gives you some length. Ryan Helsley has pitched back-to-back nights, and I don't think any Mets fan wants to see him on the mound right now. So he is unavailable, I would assume. Tyler Rogers, likely available because he's always available. He would be pitching his third consecutive night, but Tyler Rogers is a rubber arm, and he gives you the ability to do that. What's pretty impressive about Rogers, he's made 14 appearances with the Mets since getting traded, and that leads this team by 3. Helsley's made 11 appearances, but when it comes to innings pitched, he leads the Mets bullpen by nearly 5 whole innings in the month of August. You have Soto, who's at 9 2/3, and then you got Rogers at 14 1/3. So that's pretty impressive how frequently this guy's pitched, and he's been very effective. 1.88 ERA in a Mets uniform. He had a 1.80 ERA at the time of the trade, so he has been as advertised. So I'd imagine that Rogers would make himself available for this game against the Phillies. He can be your 8th inning guy. You have Brooks Raley, who got a day off, so he should be ready to rock. And Edwin Diaz did get 5 outs, but he did so on only 22 pitches, 17 of which were strikes, and he's only pitched one time really in the past week, or pitched once last week, now once this week. He had a couple of days off in between appearances, so I think he should be good to go in a safe situation for the Mets. So I actually think they're in a better spot than you might imagine, considering how much they've still used the bullpen recently. Stanek and Castillo each got a day's rest, so I imagine they would also be available. I think if you need a fresh arm, which you probably do, Brazaban maybe goes down. He was hit pretty hard in this appearance. The Mets have some options there. If they want to get, a little bit sexier when it comes to the name they're calling on, they can get a guy that throws over 100 miles per hour that I continue to talk about on this show, and that is one of their top relief prospects, Dylan Ross, who has been awesome this year. He's in Syracuse. He hasn't pitched since the 23rd, so he's got plenty of rest. He threw two innings on the 23rd, so he could give you length, and you can add him to the roster before the month of September. So even if he doesn't stick, even if he goes down when Jonah Tong comes up, he is available if you want him for the playoffs. So I hope that they might go that route. If they don't, it could be someone a little less exciting like Chris Davinsky that comes up that gives you some length out of the pen. So I think they probably make a roster move. But if you look at where they're at, they have a couple of options moving forward. Tyler McGill is expected to start in Syracuse on Thursday. He's going to get up to 75 pitches. Let's just say the Mets bullpen is used a lot today. You always could call McGill up early and have him piggyback with Clay Holmes on Thursday. You have that option. The fact that Jonah Tong is going to start on Friday means there's no reason to have McGill come up and start on Thursday and then have Holmes stay in the rotation. So I don't think they're going to do that. I think Holmes will make that start on Thursday, but I just want to put that wrinkle out there that if the bullpen's in a little bit of a tough spot, I wouldn't be surprised if they change course and have McGill piggyback with Holmes. More likely, they're fine. They don't need to do that. Holmes pitches in Syracuse, and McGill pitches in Syracuse, and he is an option for the rotation next week. Now, when it comes to Jonah Tong and just the function of this roster, I imagine he takes the Jose Castillo spot. Theoretically, it could be also whoever comes up, right? But let's just say Dylan Ross comes up. They want to keep him. He takes the Castillo spot, and McGill could take the Ross spot or the Brazaman spot, however you want to look at it. There's two spots in the Mets bullpen right now that can be filled by Jonah Tong and Tyler McGill, which means when you get to September call-ups, you still have an empty open roster spot available for anyone, whether that's just you want to cycle arms from Syracuse through that spot, which they absolutely can, whether that is Dylan Ross's spot and he ends up being an impact arm for you, whether that means you want Brandon Sproat to pitch out of the bullpen. You have a lot of room to play with here down the stretch to try to find the best version of this pitching staff that you carry into October. And the way things line up for these upcoming series is very interesting. Now, the Mets said they're taking it a turn at a time. If Jonah Tong gets knocked around by the Marlins, he could end up right back in Syracuse. And Tyler McGill could get inserted into the rotation, and you roll with more of your veterans in McLean. But if Tong dominates and they want to keep him in the rotation, while the Mets aren't taking this anything beyond this turn, I wanted to. So let's just run through how the Mets can line up their pitching through the road trip, through the next series against the Phillies. For the Marlins series, it's going to be Clay Holmes on Thursday, Jonah Tong on Friday, David Peterson on Saturday, Kodai Senga on Sunday. That's already locked in stone right now. In Detroit, you'd have Manaea, and he'd get the extra rest just like Senga and Peterson did. You have McLean, same thing with him. He'd get that extra rest. And then you'd have an option. You could either go with Clay Holmes or Tyler McGill. You have an off day, or you can go with the piggyback situation next week. You have an off day. You could go back to Jonah Tong for the first game of that series against the Reds, David Peterson, Kodai Senga. So against a team that you're fighting with in the playoffs right now, the playoff mix, you could go Tom Peterson Senga. That's a pretty good rotation for that series. And then it comes to Philly. It would set up for Manaea, McLean, Holmes or McGill, and then Jonah Tong. So in this pivotal stretch run, if you're looking at the next 2 weeks, you are in a really interesting spot with this team, with the pitching they can put out there for their rotation. Long gone are the days of Paul Blackburn and Frankie Montas. This is an opportunity for the Mets to have a really good rotation down the stretch, because if Tong dominates, you could end up in a situation where you're just going with your three guys that we expect to be in the playoff rotation, and Peterson, Senga, Minaya. And then the two kids, McLean and Sproat, who are, excuse me, I swear those two names are linked in my brain. McLean and Tong, who started this year in AA, which is an incredible development story for the Mets organization to get these guys up and get them up at the current status they are at as top prospects, considered some of the best pitching prospects in all of baseball. Now, building your bridge to Edwin Diaz come October, a little more tricky right now, which is funny because that's where they spent all of their resources at the deadline, basically. You got Rogers, feel good about that. You got Rayleigh, feel great about that. You got Soto, feel really good about that. So that right there is two left-handed relievers, and it kind of is great against lefties too and Rogers. But that right now is your current bridge to Diaz. Those are the guys that I think you can trust. The two guys who you need to get better are your Ryans, Ryan Stanek and Ryan Helsley. Can they figure it out come October? Or could they not figure it out at all in September and they just do what Stanek did last year and the lights turn on in October and all of a sudden those guys who are throwing 102 are integral to your success? It's very well a possibility. Reed Garrett needs to get healthy, but he should still be an option down the stretch. Your other options, you got Ross, Dylan Ross. He could be up again as soon as maybe today. You got Brandon Sproat. You got Tyler McGill. You got Clay Holmes and potentially Jonah Tong. Those are the guys that theoretically could be pitching out of your bullpen in the playoffs. To me, with the questions that are surrounding Stanek and Helsley, your supposed right-handed setup man outside of Rogers, I think Clay Holmes needs to be in that bullpen, which it's tough to say that for sure because Holmes has looked so good his last couple of starts, but this guy was one of the best setup men in baseball. So if Clay Holmes can revert right back to being the Yankees Clay Holmes, he could be your eighth inning guy. So I think it would be really important to be able to plug a guy who has so much experience pitching and leverage into your bullpen, which would mean an open spot in your playoff rotation, whether that is filled by McGill, whether that's filled by Tong, or if it's just Minaya and Senga figure it out and they're joined by McLean and Peterson in that rotation. But this team has a lot of options at their disposal. And David Stearns mentioned it in that press conference today. He said, you just want to have your best guys available rolling into September so you have as many options at your disposal. Jonah Tong, promoting him is one step into doing that. Finding a way to get Dylan Ross and Brandon Sproat on the 40-man roster by next Monday, this upcoming Monday, is the other part of it, just to give you those two other high upside, high octane arms to put at your disposal, whether that's in the bullpen or who knows, maybe Brandon Sproat still ends up in the rotation when it's all said and done. I think that's where this team really can go up a couple more notches, where come October, this team could have won the division if they play their cards right down the stretch. And they might be the team that the Dodgers fear the most, that the Phillies certainly feel the most, that the Cubs, the Brewers, the Mets might be that team that nobody wants to see in October. And I think the bats have to lead the way. But again, the pitching has to meet them halfway. But they got a lot of interesting options to do it. So today, we get to watch one of them in Nolan McLean making his third big league start in a huge spot on 4 days rest. We'll see how that goes, and I'll talk about it on tomorrow's show. But a couple days from now, we're going to be watching Jonah Tong at a big league mound, and that is really exciting as well. So again, I encourage you to check out the full show on Jonah Tong. Thank you all for listening. If you're on the audio side of things, follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listener, your first watch every day. Now, for your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out Locked On MLB Game Night, the show that'll take you around all the action in Major League Baseball with insight from our local experts as well as league-wide experts that'll take you through all the action. You can find Locked On MLB Game Night on the Locked On MLB YouTube channel as well as the Locked On MLB podcast feed.